Greetings everyone, and welcome back to my channel, The Grimm Reader. I am Kathy Grimm, and finally on the 6th of January I'm going to finish the countdown of my reads from last year. So we're going to do 10 through my favorite book of the year. And it's a very strange group. I didn't pay any attention to modern stuff this year, which is okay. I mean, I feel very good about them all because I love them. But yeah, you'll see. I've been looking at other people's, and it's like my list is so different because I'm different. But that's okay. I shouldn't be whiny. I have to try and not be so whiny. So here we go with my top 10. Coming in at number 10 was The Fantastic Long Form by Kate Briggs, which is just a beautiful little book and amazingly, so basically what happened was it was a group thing with a couple of wonderful ladies from the internet's, used to be Twitter, now Blue Sky, and there's also, we had a Zoom talk even, and you were reading this one along with Tom Jones, because this is a beautiful meditative novel about a mother, just one day in a new mother's life, where it's just her and the baby, and they're in this kind of beautiful enclosed world where she meditates on life and her life with the baby. And there's also the sense of trying to insinuate or think about how the baby is taking it all in. And of course it's been a while, so it really could be a reread, but it's sort of abstract and yet very, very detailed at the same time, like about spatial stuff and how the baby moves around the room. Sorry that I'm not up on my baby stuff. I don't know how old the baby's supposed to be. Not very old. Not a toddler. So an actual baby. But there's also the narrative voice. She's very sort of well educated. She's been to university. She has all these sort of literary, almost philosophical thoughts. So it's a very internal novel. And then I'm just realizing or remembering how it has little sort of diagrams of the rooms that they're in. I don't really remember these that much, but I guess it's interesting. And so what is the connection to Tom Jones, you may ask? Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. She decides, for reasons like that, she kind of decides, I'm not exactly sure why, to get a copy of it and read Tom Jones while her life is sort of being taken over by being a new mother. And I think, I'm trying to remember the exact reasons why, but I think she wanted to do it because it would take her out of her world and put her into this other, very, in a certain sense, very different world, where, because it's from the 18th century. It's very, and it does, and if you know Tom Jones, it does sort of center on the identity issues to do with Tom Jones, and the beginning does involve a baby showing up, as I recall. And so there's that kind of baby connection. But I'm sorry I'm being a bit vague as to why specifically she chose it. But let's see, I'm looking at Tom Jones characterizes a novel, and she goes into talking about some of the stuff in it. The two kinds of material wrapped around each other, offsetting each other, engaging these two quite different modes of address. So, it is quite abstract in a certain sense, but I like that, you know what I mean? So I really enjoyed this a lot more than Tom Jones. I mean, not a lot more. I shouldn't say that. Tom Jones is great, but it's long and it's 18th century and it gets a little bit tiresome, I would say. That's what I would, and so this actually helped me read it, and of course the group read too were to be honest, probably the only reasons I kept at it, because it was, I persevere. I keep with long things if I don't hate them, and I didn't hate it, but this was really wonderful. This is the top read, and it's also such a beautiful book. I love that it's a square shape. Most books are rectangular, and the art here, just the way the whole book kind of is so, as we say in German, handlich. It has a good feel to it. So they really paid attention, this press. I think it's the Dorothy Project. Yeah, oh yeah, we've heard about the Dorothy Project. Yeah, Fitzcarraldo. No wonder I love the sort of material aspects of the book. Kate Briggs is basically a university teacher, professor, and she has a background in theory. I'm seeing her quotes here. Oh, that's right. There was the whole Barthes thing. I'm forgetting about the Roland Barthes connection. I kind of dropped out of the Barthes reading. She's a translator. That's right. Oh my gosh, it's all coming back. She translated Roland Barthes, and they had a group read of a big Barthes book, a collection of his lectures that I just stepped away from for brain space reasons. But and I did do a bit of rabbit holing as to what she's doing, and she teaches in Amsterdam, I think, at a university with other really cool, fascinating kind of theoretical people. And, what's fun about this stuff is that you can find it on the internet. There was a really interesting conference about sort of feminist stuff, new feminist stuff, and I was watching it, and it's a little bit removed from what I'm doing, but I love looking at that stuff. So that's my number 10. Let's move this along a little bit. Coming in at number 9, The Homemaker by American, mainly playwright, but she did write some novels. I'm not sure how many. Dorothy Canfield Fisher. And I didn't know much about her. I still don't know that much about her, to be honest. I didn't look her up that much. So an American writer, and she has a connection to Willa Cather. They were friends or frenemies or something. And there's a nice picture of her, very nice looking picture. And I love her sort of messy hair. And this takes place in the fairly early 20th century, 75 years old, well, the 20s maybe. Let me see when it was published, 1924. And to be honest, it was funny when I was reading it, because to me, for something, because it was so domestic, and just the way, I was convinced they were in England for a long time, and like, wait, these are people in America? I don't think they say which town they're in. But just their interactions seem pretty British to me. But that's just the sort of, maybe because it's a Persephone book, I bet you that's why. And I associate them with Bath, the town of Bath, and just the way they always look so pretty, and uniform on the outside, but all different, kind of beautiful on the inside. But it was really good, is what I want to get at. It was a very interesting and very kind of modern. What do you do when your talents and your way of existing in the world are much better suited to the opposite gender? So we have a woman who at home is high-strung and overly controlling and doesn't like her kids, and she gets worse and worse. She's really kind of mean to the kids, and everyone is like walking around on raw eggs because she's such a house tyrant in a way, because she wants everything to be clean, and it is very well run, and the food's excellent. She's doing it all for show in a certain sense, like to show that she's good at it, not because she enjoys it. And you get the interior sort of stuff about how hard everything is, and how the main thing which really sticks out to me was how her kids were sort of not doing well, to the point of being sort of physically not well because of her overbearing ways. She just could not find a nice connection, loving, sweet, kind, soft understanding to her children. And so they were afraid of her. There's one little kid who's a little bit rebellious, and there's a whole thing with a teddy bear. But on the other hand, you have the husband. And so it is a little contrived in the sense that the husband is dreamy, poetic, sweet, loving, kind, and so nice with the kids. He's just such a sort of, he's like the perfect mother. Like, he's the ideal mother in the sense that he gives himself time to figure out, he watches his children and he tries to understand where they're coming from and help them. And he sort of shows you how what a sort of subtle and nuanced and difficult job it is to parent well. That's the whole thing about parenting. And that's why people always make mistakes, because it's very sort of demanding in a subtle psychological way, as I'm sure you all know who are parents. I'm not, but I was a daughter. So he's perfect at it, and he has to go to work and she has to stay at home, and he hates his work. He doesn't get along with the people. They don't think he's very good or competent. And then it all turns on the fact that he has an accident. And then the second half of the book is how they kind of fall into each other's role, and everyone blossoms. The whole household becomes a much healthier place. And it's like an interesting kind of experiment in switching around the gender roles. The man is the mother at home, or takes care of the home stuff. He gets into cooking in a kind of very different way from the mother. So the house kind of isn't as tidy or neat, but everyone's happy. Everyone's happy. Everyone's just, yeah, especially the kids. They all like their dad, and he's sweet with them, and he just is so much better at mothering them than she was. And she is better with them because he's doing that. And she goes and becomes a really successful sales person and sort of very quickly rises in the ranks because her joy in life is fashion and figuring out what looks good. She's very into decorating and stuff. So that's kind of her thing. She wants to just do that. She's just not really into the domestic or the mothering stuff specifically. Because she's into aesthetically what looks good for herself. She always looks the best. She knows what cuts, they talk about clothing and tailoring, which is a sort of talent, some people, or something that people like to do. And she's really good at it. And so it was a really refreshing and fun novel to read. And I would highly recommend The Homemaker by Dorothy Canfield Fisher. So yeah, that was great. It was great. Number 9. Another great read, which might be higher if I reread it, but it's always the way with, well, let me show you what the book is. The book is the one that the lady, if you were watching Pluribus, which we enjoyed, she was reading this copy at the end, which is so funny that she'd be reading this in that strange Apple show. Anyway, so Ursula K. Le Guin, my first, after many years, the only other stuff I read of hers is the trilogy, the Tombs of Atuan, and the Earthsea trilogy is what it's called. I read them in Australia, so many, many years ago. And so this is my first Le Guin since then, and it was truly remarkable. It's a science fiction novel, and so it has the strangeness of it being on a different planet, and people are dealing with this person from one planet is dealing with trying to sort of integrate or interact with people on this other planet. And the thing about the planet, as I recall, and it says here, it's very wintry. It's a winter world, icebound planet of winter. And the fluidity, one of the main things he has to contend with is the fact that it's the inhabitants of the planet are gender fluid. So they're not really connected to either one or the other. They just are there, it's not. And it is hard to sort of keep remembering that, because you're always sort of wondering, is this person that way or that way? Because that's just how we are. I mean, it's so hard to get away from that, which is probably why she wrote the book. And it sort of centers around two people who have to get along with each other and make along to save themselves. And that, there's a sort of an escape narrative. They have to make a long trek through the snow, and they are sort of on opposite sides, but they're not really on opposite sides. So the power dynamic is very complicated, but it becomes this sort of story of these two people, how they interact and how they get along. And I really need to reread this. I read this while I was in Germany taking care of my sister's cat, and I think a lot of stuff did kind of go over my head because I'm not used to reading science fiction. Of course, my history with Le Guin is my mother was also a science fiction writer, and she loved Le Guin, she loved her work. She chaperoned her on her first trip to Australia, so there was this kind of slightly personal connection. They had corresponded somewhat. And so another sort of science fiction thing. And I know that one of these podcast people that I'm interested in has done a lot of podcast episodes and maybe even interviews with Le Guin. Between the Covers, David Naiman has done stuff with that, and I really need to listen to them. But I do have a lot of sort of psychological issues reading my mother's work, just because, I don't know, they bring me down because, she wasn't it was just, there's a heaviness there. Yeah, probably because she's just not around, and also because she wasn't that successful, or there were issues and blah, 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 the usual stuff. And it almost spreads to other things like Le Guin, because I see them in the same orbit, in the same world, which is sort of silly, but that's how my brain is working. But I did enjoy this, and I really want to read The Dispossessed, and even maybe reread this. I'm thinking I should reread this, but I'm not sure when. But yeah, no, it comes in at number 8. So towards the end of the top 10, but definitely top 10. And it might be higher if I sort of get into it more. Coming into number 7, another wonderful read. Trollope again makes an appearance. This is a standalone, which is probably my favorite standalone so far. The Way of the World was pretty good, but it wasn't my favorite. And then there's a couple of other ones that I've read. But this one is called, it has a great name. That's kind of why I read it, because I just think it's hilarious. Is He Poppinjoy? Is He Poppinjoy? And that's kind of the main gist is this, there's an identity thing going on. And here's another illustration of the couple that is at the center of this book. She's sort of sweet and nice and loving, and he's stern, but not really unloving. He is kind of a positive character, but he's a little bit self-enclosed. And it was a lovely, mainly listen for me. I did listen to this, and it was probably my main person who reads Trollope. I forget, well, maybe an older person, not Vance. Maybe it was someone else. Vance is more like Dickens. But this was thoroughly enjoyable. Typical Trollope in the sense that it's his world of 19th century stuff, but it's all about this one strange family, and then this young woman is married into the strange family, and then there's a sort of ne'er-do-well brother who's the brother-in-law of the lady who marries into the family, and he's difficult, and he makes difficulties, and he comes back from spending a long time in Italy, and he brings along with him the creature that one isn't sure whether he is Poppinjoy or not. And I'm trying to remember what happens. I don't know. I don't exactly remember well, I think I might know, but I'm not saying anything. And of course, this one does have a happy ending, and everything sort of turns out for the best. But there's this it goes up and down because it's a typical Trollope. This is definitely not as sad as the other one I read, the earlier one, but I liked it a lot. I liked the characterizations. I liked how it moved, the funniness. It had maybe a lighter touch than some of the other ones, less severe, but it still had drama and people not getting along, and people like the married couple having their difficulties, and it's sort of the difficulties of a young pretty wife, and the father's a little bit in protecting her to the point of getting in the way of the husband. And yeah, very, very enjoyable, highly recommended. I'm not sure where it falls. I didn't have any copy except the listen, and then I went and splurged on this beautiful folio edition of it from Etsy or somewhere from 1998. And is there anything else I want to say about it? This is the book that I think Donna sent me as a gift, and I'm so glad she did, because it comes in at number 6 of my best reads of the year. Smallbone Deceased was such a surprise because it's a little mystery. I don't have high hopes, or just, I don't know what to expect that much with mysteries, but this really was great. Very well written, and very sort of, all it is a straight up mystery about this person who is, and it focuses on a law firm. So you get insights into how law firms work and function in the, let's see when this was. I want to say it's been a while. What period are we talking about? 1950. So in London. This is English. And so I thought that was insightful and amusing, and I actually thought the writing was really good and sort of nuanced in a way that I had not expected it would be. I knew nothing about Michael Gilbert, and I really want to read more. I just finished, my last book of the year was The Man in the Queue by Josephine Tey, another early mystery, British, and I thought, maybe it'll be just like this one, and it was not. It was fine, but the writing was clunky. The writing was not smooth and insightful and sort of sensitive like this was. So I really like this. I want to read more Michael Gilbert. Oh, look, I made a list of all the people in the book. Sometimes I do that. I make lists just to keep an eye on everything. It's a sign that I liked it, if I think it's worthwhile of doing that. And so, yes, thank you to Donna for gifting me this lovely little read that became my 6th favorite book of 2025. Hooray. Okay, something completely different that's on no one else's list but mine. My only nonfiction, but wow, what a doozy. In the Basement, im Keller, Jan Philipp Riemsma, a an heir to a tobacco fortune in Germany, who gave it all away, or he bought it out, and since he's such a sort of nerd in a certain sense, what does he do? He goes and founds a literary institute at a university and becomes a university professor and does things with literature, talks and whatever. Funds an institute for sort of socially, it's sort of into the sociology of literature. He's interested in sociology of literature. And he was just living his fine, nice life with his family, his one son, when on the Monday, the 25th of March, 1996, he's kidnapped. And so this is a hard read. This is sort of, but it's actually, I mean, it was sad because it's about sort of the day-to-day experience he underwent of being kidnapped. And so this is a highly intellectual person who was put in this, and it's for ransom, it's for money, they want money. And I think they actually got the money. It actually worked out. But then it didn't, because per usual, the people got caught later on or something. Yeah, no, he did get caught. And it was mainly one guy, as I recalled. And just the sort of, the psychology of being in someone else's power and dominance, and what you have to do, everything you do is to appease these people who have kidnapped you. And I knew it would be an interesting read, and it was. It was very cerebral, but also kind of down to earth about what he did there, how did he survive mentally. The kidnapping itself wasn't super long. He got out, I want to say, some months later, only 33 days. Yeah, so not that long, only about a month, but you know, that's enough if you're in there. In this basement. And actually the thing about this picture is it's a picture of maybe the real basement where he was. You can sort of see, kind of dingy looking, but not too bad. And he would pace a lot, and he would reconstruct literary works, and he got the people to bring him stuff to read, so even newspapers. And he was fed fairly basic but okay food, but of course the physical toll and the mental toll were very heavy on him, because a lot of times he thought he was going to die and get killed, and they kind of play with that too. So just a sort of how does someone react in an extreme situation? That's kind of what this is, and I think it sort of satisfied my curiosity in these extreme situations. Like, how do people function? How do you survive being in another person's power? You know, or you're trapped, you're kidnapped. And then he doesn't talk that much about afterwards, as I recall. It really is just a picture of, well, there's at the end, as I recall, he does go back to the room. He has to go back to do some kind of, for witness purposes, and that's kind of hard on him to go back into that world. And I think, as I recall, I'm sorry, my thoughts are a little bit not doing justice to the depth, to this quality of the work. One thing he kind of hones in on is how his identity as a whole being is completely changes when he's there, and he becomes a kind of different person. And then when he gets out, he sort of leaves that person behind. I think that's part of it. And so that's why going back there was difficult, because he's sort of revisiting who he had to become to survive this. And it's nothing sort of obvious that changes him, but just your whole sort of sense of self and your whole identity gets kind of gets very closed in on surviving. He would do things with the water bottles they gave him. He would sort of always be trying to sort of save enough water, because one thing that was very hard for him, he had this notion that they would forget him there and that no one would find him, and then he would just die. And that's really sad too. That's gonna get your anxiety going, this idea that he would be forgotten there forever. And so he would sort of hoard what the resources that they gave him. And part of doing that kind of stuff is also just to sort of give your mind something to think about that's not the awfulness of your situation. Because another thing that he did, I think that's what I sort of was getting at when I said he became someone else. It was a way to sort of survive, in the sense that when he was this other person, that other person was just about the reading that he's doing there and the food he's doing, and trying to kind of get as much satisfaction out of the minuscule positive things that are happening to him in that moment. It forces you to live in a moment-to-moment way and be okay with that in a way that we don't have to in our normal lives. I think that's part of it. I have a feeling I'm still not doing it justice, but that's okay. It's hard. And he would write his family these letters, and they're really touching. The boy was, I think, a teenager, at the time, and has gone on to become a musician or a music producer. You know, they all have these nice careers because, well, they're well off. And what happened to the money? So it was quite a bit of money that they gave. There was a couple of botched attempts, but then it worked. And then they did recover it, and I think he got most of it back. So that's good. He's an interesting fellow because he's definitely sort of a, he's one of these really rich people, but he's not an awful rich person. He's someone who's doing quite interesting, he's doing his passion. And see, I came upon him because he's a big fan and sort of collector of, and sort of researcher about the works of Arno Schmidt, the German modernist who we all he's sort of like the James Joyce of Germany. And that's how I came to be interested in him. And then I saw that he had this book, and I thought it would be really good, and it was really good. So that's why it's number 5 in my list. The top 4 are the big 4, are my favorites. Starting off strong with this another very strange novel that's not going to be in anyone else's best of list, but you know what, that's okay. Quick addendum, or I wanted to add one tiny bit of extra information to the book about the man who was kidnapped in the basement. And it's the fact that the whole time he was there, he was shackled. And so he had chains around his ankle, and the pacing was only as far as the chains would go. And that was another sort of aspect of the torturous experience that was kind of important that I forgot to mention. And Shirley's saying hi. Hi, Shirley. Coming in at number 4 is this strange novel by one of my favorite writers from the 19th century, the Austrian writer Adalbert Stifter. His novels are strange because what he's trying to do is depict a kind of utopian, well, in the sense that there's no conflict. All the relationships in here, there is conflict. That's the whole point. There is conflict in the plot. People do have issues with each other. But in general, it's always sort of, the goal of it is to get over the conflict. And most of it does center on positive relationships between, like this, the focus is, so it's called The Folder of My Great-Grandfather. And so what's fascinating about the novel is the role of the folder. This folder, which contains the grandfather's diary entries. And I was just rereading a tiny little passage which sounded like this is a planner person. The great-grandfather got great joy out of writing in his diary and even coloring out the letters. It says something about coloring, like using colored markers to make the letters look different, which I thought was so funny because it's kind of like reminding me of what we do with our planners. And it all centers on, so the great-grandfather was a doctor. And he takes his job, he's very conscientious about his job. And so the novel sort of moves, first there's a frame of finding the great-grandchild finds the folder. And that takes a while because it takes going through the house and just coming upon these. It's a red leather folder that's sort of tied together. And it is sort of an important object in the novel. And so then he opens it up and it's sort of not really in order. And so part of the novel is the great-grandson deciding to put it in order. And as I recall, the way we get it presented to us is he reads it out to his family. He reads out the journal. And so then it turns into Lily at the door. Yeah, she's back. Him sort of telling the story of the great-grandfather. And so it's sort of further back in time, sort of 1700s. And the grandfather had a sort of interesting life. He went to university and was close friends with this other fellow who ends up disappearing under mysterious circumstances, and it has to do with the woman. And as I recall, he does come back when the main guy, the great grandfather, is a doctor, and they do kind of reconnect. But as I recall, it's sort of split up into a city section where they get to where they're students, and they sort of, there's an emphasis on their clothing and stuff like that and their interactions. But then he moves into a village, a sort of mountain village in Austria, but it's close to Czechoslovakia, Bohemia, so that border kind of area, or that area. And so a lot of the novel is about how he gets settled in this village, how the village sort of, he takes care of the people in the village. But there's a lot of sort of building, and they build a bridge, and so they have to sort of get the rocks for the bridge, and there's a lot of sort of village planning going on. And one of the main connections he makes in this village that he's in is his mentor is this former army person who is depicted as sort of what's the word, having the same kind of interest in architecture and a beautiful house, and having things run really well and smoothly. And he takes him under his wing, and they become friends, and they kind of visit each other. There's always a sort of a formality to Stifter's descriptions of people's interactions, which is part of the sort of harmonious stuff that's going on. There's never any, like, one example is this, and I know for a fact that wasn't true for Stifter, who always had money problems. In a story, if there's money involved, it's always sort of the father gives the child money, and the child manages the money extremely well, so much so that he is, doesn't need to go back to the father for more money. Like the opposite of these Trollopian characters falling into debt and being paid, people around them pay their debts, specifically the fathers. The opposite of that. So people who sort of are very bourgeois, very able to look after themselves. And so the point of the novel is sort of that the diary entries play an interesting role in it. And as I recall, it had to do with the fact that he would write things down, maybe sort of plans for the future almost, and then put it away. And then when a certain amount of time had passed, read the entries. So he was sort of projecting his writing into the future and then reading it. I don't recall exactly how that all went down, but there was some kind of ritualization of the journal entries that was very interesting and very unique. And I think part of the reason why I'm sort of floundering about what the ending was, I don't think he really managed to finish it, because poor fellow did pass away of his own accord at some point in the I don't know what decade. This was published in 1841, and it's considered his most personal work, a sort of a quasi-autobiography, even though Stifter wasn't, I don't think he was a doctor, he was a painter and a literary guy. And so it's hard to express why I love it so much, but I think it's just the writing and the strangeness of the style, this stilted lack of, people are always sort of trying to better themselves in this very Biedermeier, as we call, so Victorian Biedermeier way. And there's a lot of just daily descriptions of comings and goings of his life there, and of taking care. And he also spends a lot of time talking about how he became a doctor, how he studies, how he remembered things on his own. He does a lot more than what is expected of doctors at the time. He sort of takes it to heart and does more than. But then he still sort of has doubts as to, because of his slight alienated way of interacting with people, he says, was I a human or was I a doctor? What good did I really do? And of course, he's being a little bit hard on himself, which is part of the problem, I think, because we see him doing a lot of good and saving people and helping people. And, he's the opposite. We just finished the show about James Garfield, that quack who made his final days so torturous because he was getting in there trying to get the bullet out without any kind of anesthesia. It's just so awful. This doctor is much more conscientious and trying to keep up with modern sort of changes in how people are treated. So yeah, and even though I say that there's not much plot here, that not much, a lot happens, and there's actually one quite poignant scene, but I couldn't find it, where there's an accident, and there's a little doggy involved, and it's really quite sad. But then I think part of it is this idea of needing to be resilient and move on and still have a good life despite the tragedy that is a part of life, is one of the messages here. There's a lot of messages. And I love his writing, and I love, even just in a kind of utopian way, the opposite of being cynical, like trying to sort of describe these somewhat unrealistically perfect worlds, or worlds where people are all getting on and doing the right thing, and stuff happens and it's all wonderful. It's a bit of a wishing, but not knowing that it's not the truth. And I think there's some commentary on industrialization there that I haven't quite figured out, or modernization. He's not exactly critiquing it, but he's maybe trying to draw attention to what is lost. A little bit how we talk now about, we're also screen addicted, and so what is lost there. A fascinating work. I always love Stifter, and it comes in at number 4. I had not read it before, and I'm glad I did. I will maybe try and read it again. We are down to the top 3 books. My coming in at number 3, it was absolutely fantastic, and I'm so glad. Elizabeth Gaskell's Wives and Daughters. What a fantastic novel, even though also not finished, but you kind of know what's going to happen at the end. This was so much better. I didn't really care for Mary Barton, which I read, and I think there's a big gap in. This is a later, perhaps even her last work, and then Barton is an early work. I thought Barton was a mess of a novel. There's too much, and it was too sort of overly goody a little bit in the one woman, and so this, I kept thinking how modern this sounds, just because of the characterization of the 2 girls, so the young woman in the book, and then the suitor, so to speak, and then the next generation up, also another doctor, and they're all the relationships with each other also were really well done and really quite modern seeming to me. I kept thinking, wow, this isn't a Victorian novel. It seems so modern. Let's see when it was. It may be a later one, and that's part of it. 1864, and she published Barton in 48, so that's a bit of a gap there. So this is 1864, and by that time she's really learned something. So this was mainly a listen for me, but I did have a copy of it already, and I just absolutely loved it, and I would highly recommend it for a Victorian read. It's fairly long, 700 pages, about, not quite, almost 688. But they just fly by because you're so invested in the characters, specifically the main character, I would say, is Molly Gibson, and her terrible, well, not great mother-in-law that she ends up having, and then the mother-in-law's daughter, who's very interesting, and then Molly's father, and the whole comings and goings, and then the 2 sort of young men from the sons of the squire. It's all very well done, and the dialogue was great, and the characterization was great, and I highly recommend it. My number 3 of the year. Number 2, almost number 1, but I think it's number 2. I think it's number 2. I think number 1. I'll just keep the order. My number 2 novel for the whole year was yet another one featuring religious people, namely The Corner That Held Them by Sylvia Townsend Warner. A strange novel about sort of the history of a nun's convent, nunnery, just a nunnery is what it's called. And there's talk of building a tower in there. It's quite architectural. Now, so this is exactly this is what I wanted from The Pillars of the Earth, and this is kind of gave it to me, because it too is sort of, there's a wide swath of time, and you don't really get to connect that deeply with any of the main people. Although I do have a special connection to one of them, who then does also go away. So it's really about this place and the people coming into it and then leaving it, the nuns per se, and they're trying to keep things going. And there's a lot about how their limitations as people gets in the way of things really happening or going well. And so when you get a good prioress, things go great. Kind of a little bit like pillars. But then when the prioress, or when someone's not so great at their role, or just, yeah, there is a sort of talent to what's going on here in this work. But that's one level of it. And then you get the sort of more internal, the sort of desires and wishes of these women and what they really hoped for. And some of them hope for this, to build a tower. And there's this sense of them getting a little bit obsessed. They have these sort of special obsessions that they get regarding certain plans for the priory or the nunnery. But it's basically a space, and you see the people coming and going into space, and you hear about their stories, and you do get connected to people. But it's just, the writing was really good. And so I hope you understand that, even though I'm not doing it, again, not really doing in my review, I'm not doing it justice, but I think it's the strong writing and also a lot of sort of descriptions of the buildings and nature that keep you going, and that kind of make it a lovely, I'm trying to remember if I listened to this or read it. Maybe I listened to it but then I also had it. To be honest, I'm not quite sure. No, I must have listened to it because this is a little too unmarked up. And so I think that's what happened. I think I mainly listened to it and then loved being able to look in the book. I have here something that I wrote. Maybe I wonder if I read this in a previous video, but I just marked out this paragraph here, and this is early on in the book, just to give you a sense of the style. So what's going on here? They're in there. They're going to their midnight praying that they do, and then this happens. A sensation of unmitigable loneliness crushed her spirit. She lived with these women, and she would end her days among them, yet she understood them no better than they understood her. There can hardly be intimacy in the cloister. Before intimacy can be engendered, there must be freedom, the option to approach or to move away. She stared at their faces, so familiar and undecipherable. They are like a tray of buns, she thought. In some the leaven has worked more than in others, and some are a little underbaked, some are a little scorched, in others the spice has clotted and shows a brown stain. But one can see that they all come out of the same oven, and that one hand pulled them apart from the same clump of dough. A tray of buns, a tray of nuns. So that's kind of a little bit of a silly quote, but I did kind of like this analogy with because it kind of gets to the sense of their individuality, but also their sameness. And I like that kind of, and it also has the quality of the writing. It has the quality of a little daydream that someone might just have. It's a little off or weird, but it's just kind of thing that certain people, when they think about things, they make these strange analogies. I thought that was kind of funny. And so this is one of the main ladies, I think, that I liked. I'm trying to remember who it was. There's a lot of, so what happens is there are a lot of people in here, a lot of people who come and go, and it does cover a certain time period from 1349 through 1382. So, and I think there's a section to do with the plague too. I'm not sure. Yeah, no. Sorry, I'm like, I want to reread this one too because it's been a while, but I do remember really, really enjoying it and just being so happy that I was able to be in the world of this book for some time. It's also sort of, it's been a while since I read it, and I've lost a little bit, but I still remember that I loved it and would highly recommend it. Now I'm getting this feeling like I need to reread books more. Maybe it's a sign of age. Okay, and so my final book, my favorite book of the whole year. Unfortunately, something strange happened to the cover, so I'll put a cover in here somewhere. And so I only have this strange cover that I re-stickered with my own stickers. So yeah, what book is this? My favorite book of the year. But I love that it did that because it kind of makes me feel like I own, this is my book now. So the book I'm talking about, my number one read of the whole year, is the last installment of the Palace series, The Duke's Children, by Anthony Trollope. What a strange choice, but I loved it. I've always thought it was kind of brave of him to center a set of novels around a boring person. This boring person becomes Prime Minister of England, so, how boring is he? And he's not really boring, but he's so devoted to doing the right thing in a certain sense that kind of seems boring. It's almost like a parallel to Stifter. He's like a good person, and he's not about ego. He's not flashy. He's sort of a good guy. and a little closed off, a little formal perhaps, he has difficulties connecting to people because he's a little, just the way he is, he's kind of formal. And so it's about him and his relationships around him specifically. And of course it's the end of a series. So when a female friend, that's kind of an important friendship in here. She's a part of the other books, and she's connected to Phineas Finn. So of the 6, this is definitely my favorite. And this is they found a lot of the things that he cut for the newspaper copy and put them back in. So it's much longer than what was in the serialized version. And I wanted to do that. So I did read this. I didn't listen because you can only listen to the abbreviated one. And it's just extremely well done how both of his children sort of are out of his grasp. And the main reason for that is that they've lost the mother. And some people are really mad that Trollope got rid of the mother, but I'm not. It's like, whatever. I mean, she was great. She was like the opposite of him. She's charisma. She's beautiful. She loves to sort of have connections to people and interact with them and maybe even sometimes manipulate them. And she's just the force of her character was over everything, and to sort of take her out, there's this big gap in the kids' lives, and they don't really have a deep relationship to the dad. And now finally, when it's all about them picking spouses, he kind of feels how he needed to be more in their lives. And so he slowly kind of, over the course of the whole book, he slowly comes around, he slowly kind of starts to understand his kids. And so it's very sort of, it's about a father being initially kind of unable to understand his children and their choices for a spouse, and then also being kind of totally against them in the beginning. And he did a good job with the daughter's choice, because we have an example of a Trollopian character who's extremely gentlemanly, probably extremely handsome, which is why she likes him, and basically a good fellow, but he has no wealth and he has no name. He has nothing. And so he's become friends with the son of the Duke. So someone who does have all those things, money and a name. And so that's the only thing he has going for him, is his own being, so to speak. He doesn't have wealth or a name or anything. And so, but he still has the bearings of a gentleman and is able to win the heart of the daughter. And the whole thing is that the dad's like, wait a minute, this guy doesn't have anything. He's a nobody. You cannot marry nobody. And it all sounds kind of like trite and silly, but it's really quite subtle how all of this slowly changes. And it's like we're dragging the poor Duke into more modern times and more modern ways of doing things. And maybe that's a part of his problem, is that he's old-fashioned. Plus all the other things about not being flashy and being a good person. I mean, there's a reason why one of the early novels, there was this point where the wife almost may have not come back to him, but she does. And I think it's because she realizes he's a good fellow. He's a good guy and he loves her. And the person she was running away with is not like the guy, this one, the daughter likes. But there's a sort of a superficial similarity in its he's a handsome, but he's like a handsome ne'er-do-well. This person's, there was this point where, how is he going to be good or bad? That's always with Trollope, like how are these characters going to evolve? That's part of the joy of listening to the works. It's just really, really enjoyable, and I should really probably join the Trollope Society and become one of the people that goes to the Zoom meetings and gets access to all the good stuff. I think I might do that in retirement. So, kind of fits retirement to be a Trollopian. But I'm just a Victorian person. I mean, you see how much I like the 19th century stuff. So that was my favorite book. And I have blabbed for a long time because I have a few bits here that I have to stick together. So this would be a long one. And I'll just put timestamps in, probably without the titles, because I think it's fun to sort of go into the video and see what the books are. And yeah, that's a wrap for 2025. I'm excited to move on into the new year. I think I've started my new listen for sure, and my new read too. I just started today, and I think I'm going to do the same thing of having them have a quota that I try and fulfill every day. But more on that in an update that will come fairly soon, I hope. Thanks for your comments, and I hope this wasn't too boring. And yeah, have you read any of these strange books? Probably not many people have, but And yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.